Whether you visit our many historic sites, explore our thousands of acres of parks, launch a business, or study at one of our acclaimed universities, you'll agree Mercer County has it all. Mercer County, picture yourself here. Mercer County Executive Brian Hughes and the Board of Commissions are proud to sponsor Mercer Local Influencers.
Presenting Mercer Local Influencers, featuring leaders in our community whose positive influence is bringing energy, growth, and vitality to Mercer County. Presented by YourTownTube.com, Fifth Feb and WellTube, and Stimulus Brand.
Welcome, my name is John Gertica. Hello, Mercer County. We're here on the set of Mercer Local Influencers. And our guest today is David Newton. David and I have known each other for some time, and I have to say early on in my career in banking in the area, David was sort of the international man of mystery that I used to run into at Palmer Square. And I've gotten to know him and be a friend, and I'm so glad to welcome him today. David, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for inviting me. And I wish there was actually more mystery about my life, but in the few minutes we have, I'll be able to reveal all. Okay.
Very good. So let's talk a little bit about those myths about the David Newton that I know and got to know. At the time, you were in charge of Palmer Square management, so you oversaw the retail shops throughout the Princeton community.
Yeah, that's a little too grandiose. That okay. I oversaw specifically the Palmer Square, the shops on Palmer Square, the offices on Palmer Square, the non-hotel residential on Palmer Square, and the parking. And I did that for about 21 years.
Yes, and 45 years in New Jersey.
45 years, not great at math, 45 years in America, and next year is my 40th year in Princeton.
Great. Well, I'm glad to know you for many of those.
Thank you.
And we talked a little bit before about what you saw as the guiding principles for how you oversaw those shops and those residences, that you sought to strike a balance between the retailers and create a sense of community. Could you talk a little bit about your efforts during that time, and then we can go back in time to what helped you form those?
Yes, I'd already had some sense of Princeton because I'd worked here from 1983 till 1995 when the Palmer Square opportunity came along. Mm-hmm. And so I was somewhat able to hit the ground running in that sense. And likewise, in the past, I'd had retail leasing experience. I'd had some management experience, some office leasing experience. So again, I had some background to it. I think I told you that when I was young, I come from a family in England, and one of the things that the family owned was a department store in London,
yes,
which actually burnt to the ground in 1981. And I was away at boarding school for most of the year, but on returning, I used to sort of come home for the holidays, and after a few days around the house, my mother was basically quick to tell my father, said, for God's sake, get him a job. And so for most summer holidays, or most holidays in general, I used to work, for a few weeks to a month in different departments in the department store. And the goal regarding Palmer Square was really, what I'd learned back there was to try and create a tenant mix that represented what I would say different departments, sort of a diverse tenant mix to which people could benefit from, and that there would be ample choice to keep people coming.
And that was a lesson learned in the civil stores in that London.
It was called Civil Service Stores, and it was an old store. And then in 1981, it burnt to the ground. And I think it was, other than the Blitz and the Great Fire of London, it was sort of this huge fire in the centre of London. But up until that time, it was a niche department store located on the Strand, which is the central corridor between the city, which is Wall Street, and the West End, which is where everything else goes on.
But the impressions that it gave you was those retailers were of varied sort, and they were mixed and matched to create a flow through this type of store?
That's right, and it was to create as much diversity as you possibly could. So it was important to keep different types of retailers at Palmer Square, that so that there was that there wasn't too much. You had the challenge of maintaining the homogeneity of Palmer Square, but also to create as much diversity as possible. And I worked with pretty much the same group of people for those 21 years, and we were very blessed at that time.
And you brought that then to the Palmer Square influence. And we can see that resonate to this day, although there's some challenges within the retail world as we know it.
Right. So in the retail world, you've had to deal with, it's kind of the perfect storm. You've had the onset, you had the recession, you had the onset of online shopping, which is mainly through Amazon. You then in 2020 you got hit with the pandemic, and so having said that, the country was already somewhat over retailed, and so there have been many challenges, but it looks like Palmer Square is going to come out of it fine, and I think between what you see with the opening of Hermes in 2023 and the long-awaited relocation of Triumph Brew Pub, everything will be back to normal, hopefully in 2023-24.
Or the new normal in 22, 23, 24.
No, exactly. But in the meantime, it hasn't. There have been some wonderful tenants in the downtown who have very much maintained themselves and have anchored the downtown. A number of them are located on Palmer Square, and another of them on Nassau Street and Witherspoon Street.
Well, and I can see it on a regional basis in that there are a lot of developers that have really envisioned and tried to create, and some successfully, that sort of live, work, and play model, where people can walk to a downtown area, can do shopping, can go to dine, and enjoy the communal activities that Palmer Square offers. So I think that model is one that's trying to be replicated, although there's a history to Princeton that you can't find in many other locations.
Correct, and I think Princeton lends itself very much over to that model. I've recently been blessed by my older son, even though he's still working out of New York, and he bought actually in the center of Princeton, and it's more, I've got my daughter-in-law to thank for this, but she very much enjoys the fact that everything really is at her doorstep, that she can walk out of her house and that everything she wants is there, especially small world coffee.
And there's a number of shops and places like Small World where people can gather, and obviously you see that sense of community that's been created, and diversity too.
Right, and you really do have some great retailers in this town. Some of which have been imported, like say a Blue Mercury, which was a great success. But then you've got people which are totally homegrown, like Jazam's Toys, Joanne and Dean, Small World Coffee, Hamilton Jewelers. A number of these stores are stores which really came from the Princeton/Trenton area, and have basically built their name and their reputation around being part of this community.
And over time, I believe there's a Hamilton jeweler store, an old building in Trenton that I recall seeing. So.
That's correct, and they also have a couple of stores, I think, in Palm Beach.
That's right. So that idea of community is something that you developed in London, but you also had a stop and stay in your education down in the Philadelphia market.
That's correct. I mean, I came over here one summer, the summer of '77, the summer Elvis died, and I got a job at a company called Strauss Greenberg. Again, it was through a connection of my father. Strauss Greenberg was both a brokerage company and was a developer of regional malls. And I had a boss there whose name was Ben Strauss, who was the senior partner at the time. And anyway, my last year at the University of Manchester, I received this letter saying, I understand that this is not very politically correct, this story, but it basically said that personally I don't want you back in the office, but all the women in the office want you back. And so back in 1978, 7 days after I graduated, I got on a plane, came to America, and I've been here ever since. Then Ben, after I got back, Ben said, you know, if you stay here, the key is you need to get involved with American education.
Right.
And I was lucky enough, I applied to graduate school, and I did my 2-year MBA at the Wharton School.
So that was a stretch of time just prior to you finding the Princeton area, where you spent it in Philadelphia and got a feel for retail a bit there, I guess.
Right, I went back, following Wharton School, I went back to Strauss Greenberg, and got married, and then came up to Princeton in 1983. I'd been here once before as a guest of, her name was Barbara Johnson. She later went to the name Christina. Johnson, and she was married to a man called Cam Williams, who is well known as the film critic for the Town Topics. And Cam and I were friendly, and Cam and Christina had invited me to a party to the Princeton area, and so I was a little bit familiar with the area.
And American folk art as a result of visiting them, because
Right.
I believe she was collecting at that time as well.
She was just, I think she sold her Whaling Scrimshaw collection, and she started on circus memorabilia and folk art.
Yes.
And she's a fascinating person.
Very much so. Well, we're going to take a break. We will be back with David Newton after a message from one of our producers, Tom McManaman at Stimulus Brand. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a moment.
Want to expand your mind? How about wandering a 42-acre sculpture park and museum to discover your new favorite artist? Or roaming our gardens to discover your new favorite flower? We have a variety of activities sure to give you the cultural experience you've been yearning for. Come visit us again soon. We've missed you.
Is branding important for a small business? You know, many small businesses make the mistake of overlooking branding because they think of themselves as a business, not as a brand. But branding is important for all businesses, all sizes, because it increases their value. It gives employees direction and motivation and makes acquiring new customers easier. Think of your brand this way. First, it's more than your logo. Your brand is what people, not just your customers, will think, feel, say, and share about you when you're not in the room. So what do you want people to think, feel, and say about you? And what will you do to manage that? Small businesses face some branding challenges that larger businesses don't need to deal with. And usually it starts with money. But you can do remarkable things to your brand and your business on a small budget. Understand first what makes you unique. That's your USP. And why would customers be drawn to you? Know your customer, the lifeblood of your business. Identify what your customer needs and how they want it. Have a great logo, a Stimulus brand logo. Choose your colors and typography, and keep it simple and consistent. And be consistent in your tone in everything that you do. Create a talk trigger like the puppy in the room, your drum kit, your piano, the general look of your room. Endear yourself to your community. Focus long term. Associate with strong brands, and you'll feel like saying, hey, I like how they do it. Add value in everything you do. The customer is number one.
People are watching and talking about it and sharing.
That's right. So the most important part, like you want to brand your business, you want to brand yourself, you want to learn about your community and what the community has to offer to you, the nonprofits, the real estate, the wellness, whoever is into portions. All those different portions. And again, I think that your 6 points of touch is very important, where you are on your town tube and Fit Farm and Well tube, you are also able to share that love with the community, and that is very important.
Exactly. 2 all video websites, 2 all video newsletters, 2 TV shows now on Central New Jersey Network. So the outreach is incredible.
That is right. So what will be your next video?
Oh, we're going to have to stay tuned and watch it. Your Town Tube is today's #1 all-local promotion, social media and networking in the Princeton-Mercer region. The most effective, attractive, quickest, and affordable ways to reach a huge local audience.
And we're back on the set of Mercer Influencers with my guest today, David Newton. David, before we broke, we were talking about your life leading up to your time here in Princeton. Your time in Princeton includes your family. You have 2 sons. You mentioned one earlier. But you also have a fiance, Audrey. So
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about your family.
Okay, so I have 2 boys, Ben and William. Even their early education was here in Princeton. After I was divorced, they moved to the Philadelphia area, but they used to come up here a lot, so they were very much part of the community, things like soccer and whatever. And I think that to a large extent, much of their friend base was the friends that they had grown up with here in the Princeton area, and it remains so today. And whereas Ben now has relocated to downtown Princeton, my son William lives in Philadelphia, and we're working on him as to maybe come up to Princeton one day. They're both married, one with child, and the other whose wife is what we'd say in England in the family way. Okay.
Yes.
So
well, great. Exciting times then.
Very much so.
And Audrey's enjoying that as well.
And Audrey and I have, I don't know how she's quite managed it, but we've been going out together for about 8.5 years. We're married. We are engaged, and Audrey's a teacher. She works in elementary school in the Ewing area, and maybe sort of her experience working with children is how she can actually tolerate me or how she's tolerated me for so long.
And help you through the lessons of grandparenthood soon.
Well, there I'm actually quite good, because the children tend to relate to my level of humor quite easily.
Great, and we'll talk about it also, but you have the influence of your grandfather in your life too,
right.
Dating back early. But your introduction, I should say, your original introduction to this area came through some associates that you met out of Wharton?
No, it wasn't. It was my family. Again, family. My father had bought an interest in a real estate investment trust, which was based in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. And so in about 1983, I had the opportunity, I wish I could say I was, had a self-made element here, but, it was pretty much given to me on a silver platter, and a silver spoon has remained somewhat in my mouth, my father was sort of, in his day, sort of a great real estate man, and he just, where I think his comfort level, he didn't really know Princeton. He knew the office was based in Lawrenceville. But what he loved about downtown Princeton was because, I don't know whether it's the best way of getting to appreciate real estate, because America is a country where real estate isn't a scarce commodity, versus in Britain it is a scarce commodity. But what he loved was the setup of the downtown high street and the fact the university anchored the town on the other end of it, and so he personally was always very comfortable with the real estate climate in the Princeton area.
So your introduction came through that and then changed through associates that you met at the time.
Well, it did, but what happened was we unexpectedly got taken over. The family had owned a percentage of the business. Our main shareholder had got taken over, and as a result, we got sold. And so in 1987, I found myself rudely, in a position where I was again looking for an opportunity. In 1988, I formed an association with what is now Mercadian. It used to be
Drucker,
Ruhl and Fine, but back then it was Rosenberg Drucker.
Okay.
And so it was Conrad Drucker, his father Esmond, and Barry Friedman and his father Jerry Friedman. And we created an organization called Lower Pine Associates. And to which that partnership still exists today. It was, even though he was in the deal, a gentleman called Brad Mills, who passed away last year, was one of the partners in the group. And back in around the year 2000, he upped his interest to where it became just the two of us owning what remained of the partnership. And now that has been joined by another partner by the name of Andrew Chon.
So you and Andrew manage Pyn Investments?
So we manage something called, we own still Lower Pine, which is somewhat, which has one building in the centre of Princeton. It's actually got two buildings now in the centre of Princeton, and a few other assets, and we've maintained it, since its inception in 1987-88, which has been a good experience.
And your influence in the community has extended beyond retail. We've talked a lot about that. You have formed over your time here, you've become part of an organization called Fellowship in Prayer. Right,
and it's part of the wonders of Princeton that Fellowship in Prayer was an organization that started in 1949, and it was created as prayer being an answer to nuclear proliferation. And for a while it was a very big, important organization. Somewhere in the 1960s, early 70s, it changed into becoming a publication society. It was in New York, like many organizations, it got sent out to the suburbs to maybe spend out its final years.
Right.
But it created a very nice, well-read journal called Sacred Journey. And when I joined the board in about 2009, you still had somewhat of a significant readership. We were sending out about 5,000 copies on a quarterly basis, but we found that the readership was sound age discriminatory, is that the readership was older, and that maybe we were there was maybe subscriptions of about 1,000 to 1,500 copies. It was still well respected, but we actually printed our last Sacred Journey in 2013. We had also, thanks to Mrs. Eli Lilly, a small endowment, and the board morphed into a grant-making organization. And since probably about 2015, we've given $1 million plus away. I was very lucky that we have directors, one being Ephraim Isaac, who'd been my friend for many years, who is a professor of Semitic studies, who's first at Harvard, and he's been here for a long time, and in Princeton. And then I was joined, I think, a couple of years back by an old friend of mine called Wayne Mizell. And Wayne is a Presbyterian minister. He ran the Bonner Foundation for a long time. And it wasn't really until Wayne came along that I kind of really started to get the understanding of how to do grant making. And Wayne has really turned this into grant making for leadership in both religion and in peace, and that's how we're working. And we also have a fourth director called Beverly Sanford.
And all of us share in the desire for those characteristics in our lives and for the lives of our children. So you've involved and created a sense of community within that group that's ecumenical.
So we try to come from all angles, and I believe that there's there are aspects, enormous commonalities between religions. People in this world today, whereas people don't necessarily see themselves as religious, they certainly, I think, when the takeaway from when 9/11 happened is that people said we are not necessarily religious, or many people said, but we are spiritual. And so looking at things on a broad base allows you to plug in somewhat to a broad aspects of spirituality and diversity.
And as we said earlier, one of the principles that you learned early on in your life with regards to retail and business was creating that sense of balance and that sense of community.
Right.
And doing so in a way that there was a variety of choice, but that kept you coming back. So it seems to me that your work in this effort, while it's not a business, is something that relates to the heart, which is oftentimes what retail goes after too, as we get out and shop and see and smell and see. But you've created that, or are working with others to create that in this fellowship in prayer. Is there anything that the audience should know about participating in that, or
not so much? Even though we do grant making, much of what we're doing at the moment, our allotment for the years is taken up. Even though we try to support some local causes and aspects of the community where money or funds are needed because of some disaster or downgrading or whatever. Right. However, it's always a challenge just knowing where to place money. I never thought giving money away was actually so difficult, but it really is. And we've also got it wrong often, and we've again you try and correct mistakes, and every year try and do a little bit better in how you're directing those funds. But again, with the advent of Wayne coming along, I feel in a much better, more confident position of managing this. We also own in this property a building on what I call Upper Witherspoon Street, near Community Park, and that area also, the real estate in that area has also dramatically improved in terms of values over the years.
Well, David, thank you very much for sharing your spirituality, in a sense, your family life, and your business life. Your influence in this market continues to be felt, and I'm so glad that you took the time to come in and speak with us today at Mercer Influencers. And I look forward to the opportunity to see you again out around Palmer Square and out in the community. Join us again as we have our next episode of Mercer Local Influencers. And I'm so grateful for David for coming out.
Thank you, John, and thank you to your viewers, and thank you, Devin. Thank you.
All right, all the best.
Thank you.